Warwickian, and I run Warwick Center for the Performing Arts. I'm a professional dancer and a full-time professor at Faytian College in Middletown.
Awesome. So dancing, and so you not only dance yourself, but you also are partly responsible for educating dancers as well as teaching techniques and things like that.
Yes.
So we invited Melissa here to talk a little bit about dancers and some of the things that I know we see on our end, some of the things that she sees on her end in terms of some things that may be important to the dance community. And rather than necessarily talking about specific injuries or things like that, we want to talk a little bit more about the concept of durability, just being an athlete, and some of the things that you and I have had discussions about in the past had a lot to do with how dancers are legitimate athletes. I don't know any other sport out there where you don't have you have the level of dedication and technique and skill and athleticism that's needed in order to be a dancer. And a lot of times dance teachers, dancers themselves don't necessarily share that same viewpoint, and they think of dance as sort of just an art form, and it's just about technique, right?
Right. Yeah, I think that the training that is involved with the young dancer should be focused on making sure that they are developing their technique, but also the strength and the flexibility that they need to do the choreography that is required.
Being a dancer is a very, very physical thing. And
Right.
so having the attributes of an athlete,
Right.
Strength, conditioning, and performance enhancement are things that are very common in the athletic realm, but you don't hear about a lot of that stuff in the dance realm.
Right. And I think that we have really long days, and they're training. Most dancers are training 6-7 days out of the week, and they're doing the same repetitive motions all day long.
Right.
That you end up seeing a lot of overuse injuries just because of the nature of it. You know?
Yeah.
The same thing.
Doing the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, it's all about practice, right? It's all about practicing techniques, but also practicing specific choreography, specific moves, and developing those moves and developing those specific movement patterns, sometimes to greater and greater lengths or greater and greater degrees of motion and things like that. So durability is something that's definitely a factor when it comes down to how good a dancer could be, right? So we talked a little bit about this earlier. Is we talk about like baseball, and we talk about the skill of baseball. It happens to be right in the middle of what should be baseball season now. So these athletes that are constantly throwing all year round, and those athletes are the ones that are getting hurt versus the ones that spend some time doing some things like cross training. And those are the ones that tend not to get hurt because they're breaking up their movement patterns. With dance, you and I talked about there needs to be sort of like a similar approach that's taken.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's not a lot of research out there that looks at cross training that benefits dancers, and it's not something that is that's traditionally taught throughout dance training.
Right.
I think at the most a dance teacher will suggest taking Pilates or taking yoga, to help strengthen, but there's a lot of demands that dancers have that are not necessarily met with dance training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I mean, with Pilates and yoga, it's very similar type of move, lots of elongation and things like that. And one of the things I always kind of come back to a lot of times when I speak about athletes and cross training and things like that is come back to runners. I mean, telling a runner to stop running and doing something other than running is like telling them not to breathe or not to eat. It's all they want to do is to get better at running. They just want to run more.
Right.
And so I find that a lot of times when I'm treating dancers, it's like,
Yeah.
I'm not telling dancers to stop. In fact, that's one of the things that a lot of athletes just in general really love about us is that we're not going to necessarily say, well, you need to stop dancing or you need to stop CrossFit or you need to stop this, give me, 4 weeks off. No athlete wants to hear that. And fortunately, we're not forced to do that in a lot of cases.
Right.
But a lot of times we are needing to modify movements, modify choreography, or maybe withhold certain types of patterns or movements or techniques. But it's in that cross training that they're able to stop the repetitive nature
Right.
of their practicing and their classwork.
It's like they fill in the gaps a little
Yeah,
bit.
exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, strength is huge with dance. Huge. I mean, I see it all the time. You know, you have these dancers that can do things with their body that, I mean, a lot of times gymnasts would have difficult time with, and that's all that gymnasts do is work with their body weight a lot of times, right?
Right.
So, but dancers can hold these really elongated postures for really long periods of time, and it's fascinating to me that it's not looked at, even from within the community itself, as needing to train just like any other athlete.
Yeah, there is some research a little bit of research that has happened, that is happening. I think cardiovascular research, not so much on strength versus injury prevention that I'm aware of, but whether or not the research exists, like, it's not being implemented into
Right.
dance studios.
Right.
You know, and so many dance studios focus on not only technique training, but they focus on like a lot of rehearsal of the same competition dance pieces, you know, or they just do the same thing over and over again, and that can lead to a lot of imbalances in
Sure.
the dancers, you know,
Yeah.
technically and strength wise.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you say technically, and that's something that a lot of times that people forget. It's like overuse. It's like, oh, well, I'm going to get hurt, I'm going to break it down. But it starts to degrade skill as well.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, overuse and that, I love the fact that you're in with the research too. Research has a huge role in all of this. It's not unfortunately complete enough for it to be what we can rely on in any field at this point.
Right.
But, you know, with dance, you know, again, who's the dancer that's going to volunteer for a study of saying, well, let's see what happens if you stop dancing for a few weeks and try just yoga or just Pilates or you know, just this other thing besides dance. It's going to be difficult to come up with subjects. But it's really great that they're at least making some attempts at understanding the roles that these different things play.
Right.
So one of the things I wanted to touch on also, when you start talking about durability and you start thinking about dance, one of the things that I know I see a lot of in a lot of the dancers that I treat is this, talk about repetitive, is this routine of stretching that's involved, and this a lot of the length work that comes from being, you know, having to do dance, right? So we have lots of dancers that come through that have these routines of half hour, 45 minutes every day, sometimes several times a day. First thing they have to do when they come out of the bed in the morning is, you know, 45 minutes of stretching.
Passive stretching.
Yeah, and it's passive stretching, exactly. So it's not even like they're doing a whole lot of activation. It's just yanking and pulling on stuff.
Yeah.
And then they're following that up with this, like, sometimes these really aggressive routines.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about your experience from like a studio perspective. If you have, like, let's say a classroom of students, can you tell who are the people that are spending the time doing things that are more active versus more passive, and what do you see on your side of things?
I think that it's hard to tell as a dance teacher because, you know, there could be a lot of other factors. Like, I don't want to assume that they're not doing their homework, but but definitely. I mean, you know, you see a lot of dancers that are much stronger and much more stable, and then there's some dancers that are just, you know, unstable.
Yeah.
You know, like, they can't stand on one leg without sinking into their hip. You know, they can't lift their legs. They're super flexible, and you can tell from you know, tone. You can tell from posture. You can tell from a lot of different things. But it's always mixed. And when they're growing, like when you teach when you're teaching younger kids and they're growing, like their bodies are changing all the time. You know, so I think instead of identifying them, I think giving them the skills. You know, giving them all the skills,
right.
Because at some point they're going to need it,
right.
You know, but like their bodies are constantly changing. So if they understand the importance of it, if they understand the importance of cross training, then and stretching or activating, you know, activating after or active stretching and then activating your muscles before going in and taking a full dance class.
Right.
I think that's, you know.
Yeah. And that's something that research has an enormous amount of evidence for in terms of like stretching and athletic performance and things like that.
Right.
You know, in a nutshell, if you statically stretch yourself before any athletic endeavor, your performance goes down.
Right.
You know, in your injury potential actually goes up. And there's just so much research out there. And I'm abbreviating that way down. But what I love about what you said is you mentioned how, you know, we have these dancers with flexibility without control. Yeah. And that's a lot of times what I see on my end, because I don't see.
When you see the injured ones.
I don't see healthy dancers. You know,
right,
that's the thing. Is I don't see the ones that are like, you know, are doing great. I see the ones that are not doing great. Right. So my viewpoint on and my you know my population that I see are not doing well.
Right.
So, and the ones that I do see that are very, very common are the ones that are doing these 35, 45, you know, hour-long stretching routines. You know, when they first wake up in the morning, before they do class, after they do class, sometime at night they're doing these enormous programs, and it's all static stretching. It's all gaining these length on these muscles because they feel like they need to get further and further and further. But then these same dancers can't stand in one place. They have to shift because they can't stabilize themselves in one position.
Right.
And with dance, you think about dance, you think about movement, but obviously there's also a lot of static in dance. It's like holding stuff for really long periods of time. You know, like,
which is when Pilates can become really
absolutely.
useful, because unless and dance training varies from one studio, from one teacher to the next. Some dance teachers teach really slow, really methodically, really controlled, and you have to follow, you know. And there are a lot of benefits to that, you know. And I think that there are a lot of dance teachers that kind of just want them to move, you know. And if they're just stretching, you know, and there's a lot of benefits to that too, of course. But if they're just stretching and then they're just moving, then, you know, they're never developing the strength that they need.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we teach in the institute that I teach in an institute that teaches other manual therapists how to do, you know, higher level techniques and clinical reasoning and things like that. One of the things that we teach is really, we have really 3 areas that we really need to address in order to enhance performance, you know, in a human, whether they're in extraordinary pain or whether they're an elite level athlete trying to get better. Everyone's trying to get better performance. Pain just means you're like at this end of the spectrum, right? So one of the things that we teach is we have these 3 areas, and mechanical ability, the ability of the tissues to allow length or motion, is only one of them. You still have a whole area of, can we fire those muscles in the right way to start to actually activate? Can we turn on those tissues in the way that they need to in order to function for this motion? Then we have a third thing, and that's motor control. Can you actually make that so that it is meaningful to a person? So in dance, you know, having the ability to get your leg over your head, which I wouldn't even pretend to try to demonstrate at this point, but being able to have someone pull your leg over your head is very different than you being able to hold it up there on your own. And it's even more difficult, different rather, than being able to actually get it there yourself and make it part of a pattern or make it part of a technique or a dance choreography.
Right.
You know, so there's all these other aspects of movement that we kind of lose when we just think about flexibility. So, so cool. So just to wrap it up, so we're not here all day.
Yeah. The one other thing that we had mentioned about is the idea of periodization in dance.
Yes.
Which I think is worth mentioning.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, any other sport has it. You know, like think about any like, you think of bodybuilders, they have periodization, right? Because bodybuilding is sort of where a lot of athletic training was born out of, at least the strength and conditioning world, right? But you have this event, right? So in bodybuilding, you have a specific event where you're training for. If it's powerlifting, you have a specific event you're training for. If it's baseball, you have a season you're training for, right? So there's all these different things. And in dance, you have all of those things. You have events, you have these shows or performances or recitals, but then you also have, you know, entirely different choreography that's being put out throughout the year. Mm-hmm. And so it's super important to periodize. So what periodization is is it's a way of programming on a larger scale. So when you start thinking about like working out, you know, doing a workout today and then doing a different workout the next day and then doing a different workout the next day, there's no like sort of periodization with that. Periodization is trying to structure your workouts or your training so that you're attaining skills and peaking those skills and peaking those results at the right times for what you need as an athlete, right? So as a dancer, it's peaking your technique and your skills for your recital or your performance.
Yeah.
But in the off season, it's about how do we now gain better flexibility, right? Like, think about whatever the off season might be in a dancer, right?
Summer.
Yeah. So like what are some of the things that you would work on during the summer, right?
Yeah.
So I guess flexibility, right? But also like what you were mentioning before, strength, conditioning, power, control. These are all things that don't necessarily have to be focused so much on skill or technique.
Right.
It's about really developing the body as an athletic body.
Right. And giving your body a break so that it can fill in the gaps
Yeah.
and heal if you tend to get injured a lot as a dancer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think sort of like to kind of like wrap it all up together, periodization is huge, cross training is huge. And we mentioned a lot about, I guess, the negativity associated with static stretching. It didn't really kind of fill in the gaps there, but that's really where the whole cross-training thing comes in. If you can gain flexibility, you also need to gain all these other things associated with it. So trying to take the emphasis off of stretching and off of length and off of flexibility, even as dancers or gymnasts or any sport for that matter, as a primary way of gaining performance and really putting it more towards performance being what should become the outcome, right?
Right. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
I think that wrapped it up pretty well.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So that was fun. If you guys liked this, I know it went a while, but you know, if you want to see more of Melissa and some more conversations or anything about anything topic specific, you let us know. And thank you so much for coming in
Of
and
course,
us borrowing
yeah.
your brain.
Yo, you're welcome. Thank you.
This was fun, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Thank you so much.
Bye. See you soon. Hopefully.